I came home from deployment 12 days early, and the first thing I noticed was that her coffee mug was gone from the drying rack. Not the apartment being quiet. Not the lights being off. The mug. The stupid chipped one with the faded sunflower on it that she'd bought at a gas station in Tennessee and defended like it was an heirloom. It always lived on the left side of the rack, upside down, waiting to be the first thing she reached for at 5 a.m. before her hospital shift. And it wasn't there. My name is Ethan Cole. I'm 31 years old, an Army combat engineer, and I had spent the last 9 months learning how to notice when something small was wrong before the big thing killed you. A wire that shouldn't be there. A road that was too quiet. A door left open that someone always closed. My whole job overseas was reading rooms for the thing that didn't belong. So I stood in the doorway of my own apartment with a duffel bag cutting into my shoulder and desert grit still in the laces of my boots. And my body went still before my brain caught up, because the room was telling me something and I didn't want to hear it. Her mug was gone. And so I realized as I stepped inside was she. The couch was still there. My couch, the ugly gray one she called the lawsuit, because a spring had personality. The TV was still there. But the little things that made the place ours had been carefully, surgically removed. The row of paperbacks she kept on the windowsill. The blanket she stole every night and swore she didn't. The magnet on the fridge shaped like a tiny ambulance that she'd bought me as a joke and then refused to let me throw away. All gone. Not messily, not in the way of someone storming out. In the way of someone who packed slowly, over days, deciding. I dropped my bag by the door. It hit the floor louder than I meant it to. Mara? I called, even though I already knew. Nothing answered but the hum of the refrigerator. Let me back up. Because you need to understand who Mara Quinn was before you understand what an empty drying rack did to me. Mara had been my roommate for 2 years. That's the word we used. Roommate. We used it the way you'd use a splint on a bone that's already broken. Technically accurate and holding nothing together. We ended up sharing the place because rent in our city was a felony and because her cousin knew my sergeant's wife. And that thin thread of a connection turned into a lease and then into a life. She was a pediatric ER nurse. 29 years old. Sharp as a scalpel. With dark hair she was always losing pens in, and a laugh she rationed like it was a controlled substance. She had a way of looking at people, kids especially, that made them feel like the most important patient she'd ever had, even at 3 a.m. On her 4th double in a row. She came home from shifts smelling like antiseptic and vending machine coffee, and she'd sit on the counter and tell me about the 8-year-old who'd swallowed a Lego, and I'd pretend I wasn't memorizing the way she swung her feet when she talked. Because here's the thing I never said. In 2 years of sharing cabinet space and a bathroom and a Wi-Fi password, I fell in love with Mara Quinn so slowly that I never caught the moment it happened. There was no lightning. There was just a Tuesday, when I realized I'd started timing my grocery runs to when she got off shift, and a Thursday when I noticed I'd memorized her coffee order at 3 different cafes, and a night in January when she fell asleep against my shoulder during a movie. And I sat there not breathing for 2 hours because I didn't want to wake her. And I didn't want it to end. And I did nothing about it. For 2 years, I did absolutely nothing. You want to know why? It's the least heroic reason in the world. I was scared. Not of combat. I could do combat. Combat had rules. I was scared of the thing I couldn't defuse. Because the last time I let myself want something like this, it blew up in my hands. Her name was Danielle. We were engaged. I was 3 months into a deployment when she mailed my ring back in a padded envelope with a note that said she couldn't build a life around a man who was always leaving, and that she'd met someone who stayed. No fight. No screaming. Just a small brown package and the quiet understanding that I was the kind of man people waited for right up until they didn't. So when Mara happened, when this steady, funny, luminous woman started feeling like home, I did the math the only way I knew how. I was a soldier. Soldiers leave. Soldiers get deployed with 2 weeks' notice and disappear for the better part of a year. And I was not going to be the reason Mara Quinn stood at a window waiting for a man who might come back in a flag-draped box. I loved her too much to do that to her. That's what I told myself. That my silence was a gift. I know now it was just fear wearing a nicer coat. I found the note on the kitchen table held down by the saltshaker. It was folded once, my name on the front in her handwriting. That fast, slanted nurse's scrawl that could make 500 milligrams every 6 hours look like poetry. My hands weren't steady when I picked it up. 9 months in a war zone and my hands were fine. One folded piece of paper and they shook. Ethan, it said. If you're reading this, you came home, and I wasn't here, and I'm sorry you found out this way. I meant to be gone before you got back so you wouldn't have to watch me leave. I couldn't do it to your face. I'm not brave like you. I'm moving in with my sister for a while. My half of August is paid. Don't worry about any of it. I need you to know this isn't about anything you did. You were the best roommate I've ever had. You fixed the sink when you didn't have to. You left the porch light on for my night shifts for 2 years and never once mentioned it. You are a good man, Ethan Cole, and that's exactly the problem. I can't keep living in a place where I'm waiting for something that isn't coming. I have to go somewhere I can start over. Take care of yourself. Please. M. I read it 3 times. Then I sat down in the kitchen chair, still in my boots, still smelling like a continent I'd just left, and I read it a 4th time, waiting for something that isn't coming. I didn't understand it. That's the honest truth. My first read, I thought, she met someone. She got tired of the arrangement. She wanted her own place. Every explanation my exhausted brain offered was one where I was a footnote, a roommate she'd outgrown, because that was the story I always told about myself. I was the man people left. Danielle taught me that, and I'd been a very good student. I sat in that kitchen for a long time, long enough for the light through the window to change, long enough that the coffee maker's clock ticked over from 4:11 to 5, the exact time Mara used to pad into the kitchen in mismatched socks and reach for the sunflower mug. And that's when it started to itch. That trained part of my brain, the part that reads rooms, waiting for something that isn't coming. You don't write that sentence about a lease. You don't say I'm not brave like you to a roommate. You don't tell a roommate that's exactly the problem. I picked up my phone. My thumb hovered over her name. Then I noticed the second thing. By the door, where I dropped my duffel, there was a cardboard box I'd been too gutted to register when I walked in. Medium-sized, taped shut. And on the top, in her handwriting, one word. Ethan. She'd packed a box. For me. And left it by the door where I'd trip over it. Where she knew I'd find it. You don't do that when you don't care. You do that when leaving is the hardest thing you've ever done, and you need the person to know it. I got up so fast the chair scraped. I didn't open the box. Not yet. I want you to understand that because it mattered later. Something in me, the same instinct that says don't cut the wire until you know what it's attached to, told me that whatever was in that box, I hadn't earned the right to open it yet. Not while I still didn't understand what I'd done to make her leave. So I called her. It rang 4 times. I counted them the way I count everything. On the 5th, right before voicemail, she picked up. Ethan. Her voice was careful, flattened out. The voice she used with parents in the waiting room when the news wasn't good yet, but wasn't good. You moved out. I hadn't planned to lead with that. It just fell out of me. A silence. I could hear a TV in the background and a woman's voice, her sister, Kayla, saying something and then going quiet. You're home early, Mara said finally. You weren't supposed to be home for another 2 weeks. They rotated us out ahead of schedule. Mara. How was it? She asked, and it was such a Mara thing to do, deflecting a landmine with small talk, that it made my chest hurt. Are you okay? Are you actually okay, or the kind of okay you say on the phone? I don't know what I am, I said, which was the truest thing I'd said in months. I came home and your mug was gone. Another silence. Longer. Yeah, she said quietly. I know. Why? It's in the note. The note doesn't make sense to me, Mara. My voice cracked and I hated it. Waiting for something that isn't coming. Waiting for what? Did you meet somebody? Just tell me. I can take it. I've had a rough couple of months. I'd rather just know. And she laughed. Not a happy laugh. A wet, broken little sound. The kind you make when something is so far from funny that laughing is the only thing keeping you from the other option. Did I meet somebody? She repeated. God, Ethan. You really don't know. After 2 years, you actually don't know. Don't know what? I have to go, she said. Kayla needs the I have to go. Mara. Open the box, she said. You'll understand better than I can say it over the phone. And Ethan? Whatever you decide after you open it, that's okay. I mean that. You don't owe me anything. You never did. And she hung up. I stared at the box for a full minute before I knelt down in front of it. Open the box. You'll understand. My name in her handwriting. The tape pressed down flat, and even the way she did everything. Carefully, like it mattered, like the person on the other end deserved her full attention. I ran my thumbnail under the seam and opened it. On top was the ambulance magnet. The little joke gift, the one she'd refused to let me throw away. She'd wrapped it in a paper towel like it was fragile. And underneath it, letters. Not dozens. Not some dramatic archive. 9 of them. 1 for each month I'd been gone. Each one in an envelope with a date on the front, and each one sealed. She'd written me a letter a month for 9 months, and never sent a single one. And under the letters was the sunflower mug, wrapped in the blanket she'd stolen from me every night. For 2 years, this one that smelled. I checked, I'm not ashamed of it. the one that still smelled like her. She hadn't taken those things. She'd left them. For me. I sat down on the floor of my empty apartment with my back against the door, and I opened the first letter. Month 1, it said at the top. Ethan, you left this morning at 4 a.m. And I got up to make you coffee even though you told me not to, and you looked so tired and so ready to go, and I stood in the kitchen after your cab pulled away, and I realized the apartment was already too quiet. 2 years, and I've never once minded the quiet. Now I hate it. I'm writing this because I can't send it, and I can't send it because if I send it, everything changes. And you have enough to carry over there without carrying me too. So I'll just say it here where it's safe. I miss you. Not like a roommate misses a roommate. Come home safe. Please come home. M. I read all 9. I'm not going to pretend I got through them dry-eyed. A combat engineer sitting on the floor crying over 9 unsent letters is not a dignified image, and I don't care. Because by the 3rd one I understood, and by the 9th I understood completely. And the understanding went through me like cold water. She'd been in love with me the whole time. For 2 years. The whole time I was doing my careful, cowardly math about how a soldier shouldn't ask a woman to wait. She'd already been waiting. Willingly. Quietly. Rationing her heart the way she rationed that laugh. Because she thought I didn't feel it back. Because I was so good at hiding it. I'd built a wall to protect her from a waiting I decided she couldn't handle. And the whole time she was standing on the other side of that wall, already doing the waiting, alone. Because I never gave her the one thing that would have made it bearable. Knowing it was mutual. The last letter, month 9, was the shortest. Ethan, I can't do the 10th one. I've figured that out. When you get home, I'm going to be gone because I've realized I've spent 2 years loving a man who is careful with me the way you're careful with something you're going to put back on the shelf. And I can't keep waiting to be picked up. I deserve to be somebody's first choice, not somebody's someday. I hope you understand. I hope you don't hate me. I love you. That's the whole reason I have to go. M. I can't keep waiting to be picked up. Waiting for something that isn't coming. That's what she meant. She wasn't waiting for me to come home from the war. She'd been waiting for 2 years for me to come home to her, to walk across the 6 feet of kitchen between us and choose her out loud. And I never did. So she stopped waiting. Not because she stopped loving me. Because she loved me too much to keep starving on the maybe. Most people, when they hear a story like this, think the tragedy is that she left. Look closer. The tragedy is that she almost didn't have to. The whole disaster, 2 years of it, was built on a single missing sentence. 2 people in the same apartment, in love with each other, each one silent to protect the other from a rejection that was never coming. She thought her love was a burden I didn't want. I thought my love was a risk she couldn't afford. And we were both catastrophically wrong. I looked at my watch. It was 5:40 in the morning. I had been home for 40 minutes. Her sister Kayla lived across town. 40 minutes if traffic was bad. 20 if it wasn't, and I drove like the man I actually was, instead of the careful one I'd been pretending to be for 2 years. I grabbed my keys. I want to tell you I had a plan. I'm a planner. I plan routes and loadouts and evacuation timing. I plan the way other people breathe. I had nothing. I had 9 letters shoved in my jacket pocket and a sunflower mug I'd grabbed off the floor without deciding to, and I drove across a city that was just starting to turn gray gold at the edges, rehearsing speeches that all sounded like garbage the second I heard them in my head. Mara, I love you too. Too simple. 2 years of silence and I opened with a bumper sticker. Mara, I made a mistake. True, but it made it sound like a filing error. Mara, I was scared. Closer. But she knew that. She'd known that for 2 years. She'd written a whole letter about it. Careful with me the way you're careful with something you're going to put back on the shelf. God. She'd seen me clearer than I'd ever seen myself. Kayla's building was a squat brick walk-up with a broken buzzer and a security door somebody had propped open with a phone book. I took the stairs 2 at a time because the elevator felt like a betrayal of the urgency I finally felt after 2 years of moving at the speed of a coward. 3rd floor. Apartment 3C. I stood in front of the door and my hand came up to knock and I froze. Because here's the thing nobody tells you about finally being brave. It doesn't feel like courage. It feels exactly like fear. The same racing heart, the same dry mouth, the same voice in your skull saying, what if you're wrong? What if you're too late? What if she opens that door and looks at you like a mistake she already finished making? The only difference between the brave version of me and the coward version was that this time I knocked anyway. The door opened on the chain. One eye, a slice of a face. Kayla. She was older than Mara, harder around the edges, and she looked at me the way you'd look at a raccoon that had learned to ring doorbells. You've got to be kidding me, she said. Is she here? It's 5:45 in the morning. I know. Kayla, please. Is she here? Kayla's eye narrowed. From somewhere behind her, deeper in the apartment, I heard Mara's voice, thick with no sleep. Who is it? Kayla didn't take her eyes off me. It's the United States Army, she called back, making a very stupid decision. There was a silence. Then footsteps. Then the door shut, just for a second, so Kayla could slide the chain and open again, all the way this time. And there she was. Mara Quinn in an oversized sweatshirt that wasn't mine, but might as well have been, hair a disaster, eyes red-rimmed and puffy in a way that told me she hadn't slept and hadn't been crying about Elise. She looked at me. I looked at her. And Kayla, God bless her, muttered, "I'm making coffee. Nobody follow me," and vanished into the kitchen to give us a hallway and a terrible amount of silence. You drove here, Mara said. I ran up the stairs, technically. You're still in your boots. I looked down. I was. Desert dust on the laces, on the floor of her sister's hallway. I didn't want to waste time taking them off. She wrapped her arms around herself. The sweatshirt swallowed her hands. You opened the box. I opened the box. So you read. All 9. Her face did something complicated then. A whole weather system of it. Shame and fear, and a hope she was clearly trying to strangle before it could hurt her again. Then you know, she said. And you didn't have to drive across town at 6 in the morning to let me down gently, Ethan. You could have just not. That would have been kinder, actually. Just let me go. Mara, I already know how this goes. Her voice was climbing, cracking. You're a good man, so you came all the way here because you feel terrible, and you're going to say something kind about how much I meant to you as a friend, and how you never meant to hurt me, and then I'm going to have to smile and thank you for being so decent about it, and I don't have it in me right now, so please, if that's what this is, I've been in love with you for 2 years. The hallway went dead quiet. She stopped. Her mouth was still open around whatever she'd been about to say. She stared at me like I'd started speaking a language she almost recognized. What? She said. Not a question. Just the word, dropped. I've been in love with you for 2 years, I said again, because now that the sentence was finally out of me after 730 days of holding it, I couldn't stop saying it, since before the last deployment. Since the night you fell asleep on my shoulder during that terrible shark movie, and I didn't move for 2 hours because I didn't want it to end. Since you defended that ugly sunflower mug like it owed you money. I have been in love with you the entire time, Mara, and I never said one word about it, and I need you to understand why. Because it wasn't because I didn't feel it. It was because I felt it so much it scared the hell out of me. She was crying now, not hiding it. You don't get to, she started. You don't get to say that now, Ethan. Do you understand what you're? I left. I packed my whole life into my sister's spare room because I couldn't survive one more year of loving you across a kitchen counter. You don't get to show up 12 days early and undo it with a speech. I know. You don't know. You're right. I don't. I took a step closer and she didn't step back, and I clung to that the way you cling to any small thing that doesn't blow up in your hands. I don't know what it was like on your side, but I know what it was like on mine, and I need you to hear it, and then you can throw me out and I'll go, I swear, 2 minutes. Give me 2 minutes. Her jaw worked. She glanced toward the kitchen where Kayla was very obviously not making coffee, then back at me. 2 minutes, she said. Danielle mailed my ring back during a deployment, I said. You know that. You know the story. What I never told you is what it actually did to me. It didn't break my heart, exactly. It rewired it. It taught me that I was the kind of man people wait for, right up until they find someone better at staying. And I believed it, Mara. All the way down. So when you happened, when I realized I was falling for my roommate, I didn't think go for it. I thought, don't you dare do to her what got done to you. I thought me loving you was a risk. Something that would cost you. I convinced myself that the kindest thing I could do was keep my mouth shut and never ask you to wait around for a man who might not come home. That wasn't your decision to make, she whispered. I know that now. I didn't then. I thought I was protecting you. I pulled the letters out of my jacket, that fat, crumpled stack of 9 months. And then I opened this box, and I found out that the whole time I was protecting you from waiting, you were already waiting, on your own, in the dark. Because I never gave you the one thing that would have made it not lonely. I made you carry it by yourself, Mara. For 2 years, and I called it a gift. She was looking at the letters in my hand, like they were something dangerous. You saw me better than I saw myself, I said. You wrote it right here. Careful with me, the way you're careful with something you're going to put back on the shelf. You were right. I was careful with you, but not because I was going to put you back, because you were the only thing in my whole life I was terrified of dropping. And being careful isn't the same as being brave, and it took me walking into an empty apartment and seeing your mug gone from the rack to finally understand the difference. Ethan. My name came out of her like it hurt. I'm not asking you to unleave, I said. I'm not asking you to move back in tonight like nothing happened. You made the bravest, most self-respecting decision either of us has made in 2 years, and I'm not going to insult it by asking you to undo it. I couldn't let you spend one more day thinking it was one-sided. Because that's the part that isn't true. That was never true. You weren't waiting for something that wasn't coming, Mara. You were waiting for something that was too scared to show up. There's a difference. And it's here now. It's standing in your sister's hallway in its boots, and it's not scared anymore. For a long moment, she didn't say anything. Then she said in a very small voice, "You still have the mug." I'd forgotten I was holding it. The sunflower mug, in my left hand the whole time. I grabbed it off the floor, I said. I don't totally remember deciding to. It just felt wrong to leave it there. And that, not the speech, not the 2 years, not the letters, that was what did it. Something in her face broke open. She let out a sound that was half sob and half laugh, the exact sound she'd made on the phone, except this time there was daylight in it. You ran up 3 flights of stairs in a war zone's worth of dust, she said, to bring me my gas station mug. It's a very good mug. You've said so many times. Aggressively, actually. There was one Thanksgiving. Shut up, she said, and closed the distance between us and put her forehead against my chest. Not her arms around me yet, just her forehead, just leaning, the way you lean on a door to see if it'll hold. Shut up, shut up, shut up. 2 years, Ethan. 2 years. Do you know how many times I almost said something? Do you know how many nights I sat on the counter swinging my stupid feet and thinking tonight? I'll say it tonight. And then I'd look at you and lose my nerve because you were so contained, so careful. And I thought if I said it, I'd ruin the one good thing I had, which was living with the person I. She stopped, breathed. God, we're idiots. We're the same idiot. Yeah, I said. And I finally let myself do the thing I'd wanted to do for 2 years. I put my hand on the back of her head, in that disaster of hair, and held her there. We're the exact same idiot, in stereo. She laughed into my jacket, wet and helpless, and I felt 2 years of held breath go out of both of us at once. We didn't kiss in the hallway. I know that's where the story wants to go. It's where I wanted it to go, standing there with her forehead against my chest and her sister aggressively silent in the next room. But Mara pulled back, wiped her face with the swallowed-up sleeve of a sweatshirt I now recognized as one she must have kept from some laundry mix-up years ago, and looked up at me with those red-rimmed eyes and said the most Mara sentence in the world. No, she said. Not yet. Not yet, I repeated. And my heart, which had climbed all the way up into my throat, sat back down. I'm not saying no forever. She said it fast, like she was afraid I'd bolt. I'm saying, Ethan, we just spent 2 years getting this so wrong that I moved out. If we jump straight to, if we skip to the kissing and the reunion and the everything is fixed, then in a month we'll be right back to 2 people being careful and silent in a kitchen. Because we never actually learned how to say things, and I can't do that again. I would honestly rather have nothing than have the almost version again. The almost version nearly killed me. I looked at her, and I felt the exact thing I imagined she'd felt every time I was careful with her. The urge to reach for the easy, warm thing. And I did the hard thing instead, because she'd just modeled it for me. Okay, I said. Then, teach me. How do we do it right? She blinked. That wasn't what she'd braced for. What? You're the one who is brave enough to leave. You clearly understand something about this that I don't. So, tell me. How do we do it so we don't end up back in the silent kitchen? I'm serious. I'll do it your way. I've had 2 years of my way, and it ended with me crying on the floor next to your blanket, so, your way. What do we do? Behind us from the kitchen, Kayla's voice said, Oh, I like him now. Kayla. I'm making coffee. Nobody's listening. Mara pressed her lips together to keep from smiling and mostly failed. Then she took a breath and got that focused, clinical look she got when a kid came into her ER and she had to triage fast and right. Okay, she said. Here's what we do. You don't move me back in tonight. It would feel amazing and it would be a mistake. Instead, you take me on an actual date. A real one where we sit across a table like 2 people who chose each other, not 2 people who ended up on the same lease. And we practice the thing we're both terrible at, which is saying the true thing out loud in real time, instead of writing it in a letter we never send or holding it for 2 years. A date, I said. A date. I've been in love with you for 2 years, and step 1 is dinner. Step 1, she said, is dinner, Ethan, because you and I have never once done it in the right order, and look how that turned out. But she was smiling now fully, and it reached all the way to her eyes, and I understood that I was watching someone hope again after deciding not to. which is one of the bravest things a person can do. Fine, I said. Tonight. Tonight I've had zero sleep, and I look like I've been dragged behind a truck. You look, I started, and she pointed a finger at me in warning, and I revised. You look like a woman who made a very hard, very correct decision and hasn't slept, which is beautiful. But I'll allow you to sleep first. Friday. Friday, she agreed. And then, because she was braver than me and always had been, she rose up on her toes and kissed my cheek. Not my mouth, my cheek. Slow, deliberate, her lips warm against a jaw that hadn't seen a proper razor in a day and a half. She lingered there for a second, and I felt it everywhere, and when she settled back down onto her heels, her eyes came up to mine, and there was a question in them, and I understood that we were both wondering the same impossible thing. How two people could waste 2 years standing this close to something this good. That's a down payment, she said quietly. The rest has to be earned. By both of us. Out loud. Understood, I said. My voice came out rough. I'm very motivated. I went home and I slept for 14 hours, which I hadn't done since before the deployment. And I woke up on the couch in the empty apartment that didn't feel as empty anymore. Because I knew something now that I hadn't known when I walked in. I got up. I put the sunflower mug back on the left side of the drying rack, upside down, where it lived. And then I did the thing I'd never let myself do. I let myself want the future instead of bracing for it. Friday, I picked her up from Kayla's. Not honking from the curb. I went up. I knocked. I brought no flowers because flowers felt like a script, and this wasn't a script anymore. It was the realest thing I'd ever done. Kayla answered, looked me over and said, if you make her cry again, I will end you, and I know how to make it look like an accident. I watch a lot of television. And then Mara came out in a dark green dress and I forgot the English language for a solid 4 seconds. You did the staring thing, she said. I'm off the clock, I said. It's allowed now. We went to a little Italian place with crooked candles. And here's the part I want you to understand, because it's the part that actually saved us. We didn't spend the whole dinner being sweet. We spent it being honest, which is harder and better. She told me she'd almost not left. That she'd stood in the empty apartment with the last box and nearly unpacked it. And the only thing that got her out the door was the thought of doing another year of the maybe. I told her about Danielle, the real version, the parts I'd sanded down for 2 years. I told her that being contained wasn't a personality, it was a bunker, and I'd been living in it since I was 26. She reached across the crooked candles and took my hand and said, you don't have to be contained with me. That's the whole point of me. And I believed her. Somewhere between the pasta and the check, she said the true thing out loud, in real time, no letter, no delay. I'm scared this is going to be too good and then you'll get deployed, and I'll be right back where I started, waiting. And I didn't reassure her with something cheap. I did the new thing. I said the true thing back. I'll probably get deployed again. That's real. I can't promise you I won't leave. But I can promise you'll never again have to wonder whether I'm coming back to you specifically. You won't be waiting in the dark. You'll be waiting with the light on and a stack of letters I actually send. That's the difference. That's the only difference I can promise. But I think it's the one that matters. She was quiet for a second. Then she said, send the letters. That's the deal. If you deploy, you send them. No box of unsent ones ever again from either of us. No box, I agreed. We say it out loud or we mail it. One or the other. Always. She squeezed my hand. Okay, she said. Okay. Then yes. Yes to what? Yes to all of it, you idiot, she said, laughing, wiping her eyes with the back of her free hand. Yes to the terrifying good thing. Walk me home the long way so I can decide whether to kiss you. I walked her home the long way. She decided. And that kiss, the first real one, on a quiet street under a streetlight with the whole disaster of the last 2 years finally behind us, was worth every single day I'd wasted being careful. It was not careful at all. It was two people who'd stopped protecting each other from the truth, holding on like they'd both just come home. I wish I could tell you it was smooth from there. It wasn't, and I don't want to sell you a lie, because the whole point of this, the whole reason I'm telling it, is that the smooth version is the one that got us into trouble in the first place. The trouble had a name, and the name was Kayla. Not because Kayla didn't like me. She'd decided she liked me somewhere around the sunflower mug. It was because Kayla had watched her little sister pack her entire life into a spare room and cry herself sick for a week. And older sisters don't forget a thing like that just because the man responsible showed up with a nice speech and a green dress dinner. It came out the second week. I'd come to pick Mara up and she was running late. A shift had run over, a kid with asthma, the kind of thing that made her stay past the clock every time. And Kayla and I ended up alone in that little kitchen with the broken buzzer. And she put down the dish towel and looked at me straight. "Can I say something?" she said, in the way that means she was going to whether I said yes or not. "Go ahead. You're going to get deployed again." "Probably." "Yeah." "And when you do," Kayla said, "she's going to be right back in that spare room, aren't she? Waiting. Except this time it'll be worse because now she'll have something real to lose instead of just a maybe. You get that, right? You didn't fix the problem, Ethan. You just gave the problem a whole lot more to take from her. I want to tell you I had a smooth answer. I didn't. Because she was right, and the fear she'd just named was the exact fear that had kept me silent for 2 years. The fear that loving Mara meant handing her a future of waiting by a window. Danielle's ghost still standing in the doorway, still whispering that I was a man people waited for until they couldn't. For a second, one bad second, I felt the old careful thing rise up in me. The instinct to protect her by pulling back. To decide again on her behalf that she'd be safer without me. And then Mara walked in. She'd caught the tail end of it. I could see it in her face. She'd heard her sister say you didn't fix the problem. And she'd seen the flinch in me, the old retreat, the shelf I was reaching to put her back on. And here's where 2 years of getting it wrong finally paid off. Because I recognized the moment for what it was. It was the kitchen. It was the 6 feet. It was the exact spot where every other time I'd gone quiet. So I didn't go quiet. Your sister's right, I said to Mara out loud in real time. I will probably get deployed again. And you will probably have to wait, and that is a real thing I can't make disappear by loving you harder. Kayla's not wrong to be scared of it. I'm scared of it too. I took a breath. But here's what I know now that I didn't know a month ago. The thing that hurt you wasn't the waiting. Soldiers' partners wait. It's hard, but people do it. Whole lives get built on it. The thing that hurt you was waiting alone, in the dark, not knowing if it was real. And that part, the alone part, the not knowing part, that's the part I can actually kill. That one's mine to fix. And I will. Every single time. You will never again wait without knowing exactly where you stand with me. Because I'll have told you out loud that morning, in that kitchen, before I ever got on the plane. The room was very quiet. Kayla had gone still by the sink. Mara crossed the kitchen. She crossed the 6 feet, the ones I'd never been able to cross. And she took my face in both hands. "See," she said, and her voice was shaking. "That. Right there. That's the whole thing. That's all I ever wanted, and you just did it in front of my terrifying sister without even being asked." Behind us, Kayla picked the dish towel back up. "Okay," she said gruffly, turning away so we couldn't see her face. "Okay. Fine." He passed. "Get out of my kitchen. Both of you, you're being disgusting." We got out of her kitchen. We took it slow after that, in the way we'd promised, real slow, out loud slow, the kind where nobody's guessing. She didn't move back in for 2 months, and when she did, it was because we decided it together, out loud, at the same crooked candle table, and not because it was convenient. The sunflower mug went back on the left side of the rack. The ambulance magnet went back on the fridge. The blanket she stole every night, she stole it every night again, and this time when she did, I was under it. I got deployed again the following spring. 8 months. And I sent her a letter every week, sometimes 2, because a deal is a deal, and because I finally understood the thing that took me 2 years in one empty apartment to learn, that love isn't the feeling. Everybody has the feeling. Love is the sentence you actually say. It's the 6 feet of kitchen you actually cross. It's the letter you actually mail. She kept every one of them in a box by our bed. Not hidden. Not unsent. Just kept. And on the hard nights, she'd read one out loud. And on the good nights, she didn't need to. That deployment was the hardest one I ever did, and also, somehow, the easiest. Hardest because I finally had something back home worth the whole ache of being gone. A specific face, a specific mug, a specific pair of feet swinging off a specific counter. Easiest because for the first time in my life, I wasn't managing the fear by going numb. I was writing it down and mailing it. Month 3. I miss the way you hum when you make coffee and don't know you're doing it. Month 5. A kid in my unit got a letter from his girl and I watched his whole face change and I thought, I know exactly what that is now. Month 7. I reread your letter about the 8-year-old and the Lego so many times the paper's going soft. Come get me at the airport. Wear the green dress. It's not fair, but do it anyway. She wrote back every week. She never missed one. And when the plane finally came down, and I walked out into that terminal with my bag on my shoulder, and the desert still in my laces, she was standing there in the green dress. And she didn't wait for me to reach her the way people do in movies. She ran. Barefoot, actually. She'd kicked her shoes off somewhere between the window and the gate, Kayla told me later, holding them in one hand and sprinting across a public airport like the floor was on fire. And she hit me so hard I nearly went down, and I held on to her in the middle of 100 strangers, and I understood that this was what all the careful years had been too scared to let me have. You came home to me, she said into my neck, out loud, the whole time. You came home to me. Every week, I said. No box, I promised. No box, she agreed, and she was laughing and crying at the same time, that same wet, broken sound from the phone, except now it had a whole sky of daylight in it. We got married under a string of lights in Kayla's backyard because Kayla insisted, having appointed herself the reason we worked out. In her toast, she said, I threatened to end him if he made my sister cry, and instead he made her cry at their own wedding. So technically I'm within my rights, but I'll allow it. Mara cried. I cried. Kayla cried and pretended it was the caterer's fault. Sometimes, on quiet mornings when the light through the kitchen window changes the way it did that first morning home, I look at her reaching for that ridiculous sunflower mug. And I think about the version of me that stood frozen in the doorway with a duffel bag cutting into his shoulder, reading an empty drying rack like a room that was about to kill him. That man thought he'd lost everything. He hadn't. He'd just finally, 12 days early and 2 years too late, understood the one thing he'd been too careful to see. She didn't leave because I loved her too little. She left because I loved her too quietly. And the difference between those two things was one sentence I'd been too scared to say, right up until an empty apartment made me brave enough to run up 3 flights of stairs and say it. If you'd come home to an empty apartment and a box with your name on it, would you have opened it? Would you have driven across town at 6 in the morning? Or told yourself it was too late? Have you ever loved someone so quietly they never knew? Tell me your story in the comments. If this one got you, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next.